Hello, and welcome to Will's Infinite Library. I'm Will, and this is my infinite library. You may have noticed that it has actually grown because it is in fact infinite. For those of you who are just tuning in and this is your first video, I'm referencing the fact that I used to have a really tiny bookshelf on the floor behind me and I sat on the floor. So I wanted to unveil my new bookshelves, which can actually hold a lot of books, way more than I have. So you'll see there's some kind of sparse areas that I need to fill out, which is exciting. So I have a license to get some more books. So today I wanted to do kind of a quick November update to talk about my TBRR, or to be reread list. There are a bunch of books that are on my shelf that I consider favorites or that I really enjoy, and I just haven't read in a really long time, and I don't know if they'll resonate with me the same way, and I'm really curious to see if they grow stronger and they become even more some of my favorite books, or if I'm like, well, you know, that I was into that then, but not so much anymore. So let's find out. I will quickly walk you through some of my TBRR list, which is right here. First up is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. The second book in the series just came out recently, which I didn't realize was even going to happen. I didn't know there was a second book. So that's exciting, and I've been wanting to reread this book for a while, so now is the perfect opportunity. Next up, another gay young adult novel, At the Edge of the Universe. I loved this book when I first read it, and also We Are the Ants as well. I thought was really cool, by the same author, Sean David Hutchinson. It's one of my favorite young adult authors, and it's just a really cool kind of conceptual story or kind of conceptual device used throughout it of the universe shrinking and shrinking, while the main character is a normal high school student dealing with day-to-day life, and this kind of just encapsulates everything and makes for a really cool story. Next up is Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. This was probably one of the ones I've read most recently. I read it about 2 years ago, probably. And it's starting to fade from my mind. I considered it an instant favorite, thought it was super cool and magical and just super interesting. And so I want to take another pass at it and see if it still captures me that same way. This is one that I haven't read in probably the longest time of any of these books, Another Country by James Baldwin. This was the first book that I read in school that had gay characters in it, and I just kind of devoured it and just loved to see these experiences that I, needed to read, needed to hear about, but just hadn't been exposed to. And this was a book that I bought for school, sat on my bookshelf, and I felt like I had the license to read it. So it kind of opened my eyes and really hit home. It was really powerful, really moving, and I am very curious to see how it touches me now, because I'm sure it's still going to resonate, but I think it'll be different. So I'm really curious to see what it's like when I revisit it. Next up is American Gods, another one that I've considered a favorite for a long time. I love this kind of New World mythology of all the gods kind of coming to North America and bashing heads and having this big war. It's super cool, super magical, very like urban fantasy as well. Which is something that I've gotten back into again since reading White Trash Warlock and Trailer Park Trickster have kind of turned me on to urban fantasy, which is a genre I haven't read much of other than this book, which I really loved. So I'm curious to go back and read it again. This is my TBRR list at the moment. I don't know when I'll get to all these, but they're all books I own, so I don't really feel a rush. I'm just curious to dive back into them. So I'm going to put them back here on my shelf, and they will be waiting for me, and I'm sure you'll hear me talk about some and or all of them in the near future. So with the TBRR list out of the way, let's talk about what I have been reading, and that is less. I've been reading less, which sounds weird because I feel like I've been reading a lot, but this is the only book that I've read very recently. Like it felt like it went fast, but it took me a while to get through it. I guess it took me a week and a half, probably something about that, like that. I don't like these covers that they're doing now. My copy of The House in the Cerulean Sea has it too, where it's like the cover is shorter, than the book, and it just kind of gets bent and sticks out in a weird way like that. Like, I really don't like it. I don't know. It looks cool with this like bright colored fly sheet behind it, but it's not practical. So I hope all the mini publishers watching this video take this to heart. Some brutal, honest feedback. We want covers that go all the way to the edge of the book. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about this book because it was kind of a journey for me, as it was a journey for the main character, Les. So it's about this guy, Les, who is a writer who's kind of down on his luck. He's had his relationships that he's had in the past that have been kind of long-term relationships ended, and he's on his own, and he's trying to figure out who he is on his own. And his ex is getting married, and to have an excuse to not go to the wedding, he goes on a world tour, and he takes all these offers that he's been getting over the years and turning down because he doesn't feel like they're meaningful enough, or like he's worth it maybe. And these are chances to like introduce other writers or speak about his other ex previous to his ex that's getting married, who was a famous poet. And he's often kind of brought into the conversation, like, tell us about this poet, not about yourself. So he feels kind of like he's not in the spotlight. He's kind of downtrodden and forgotten, but he gets all these offers to travel around the world for literary events. So I don't think he's that forgotten. I think he's doing pretty well, but in comparison to other people in his life, he feels like he's less. And so Les goes on this tour around the world to all these literary events. And like I said, I had a little bit of a struggle with the book. And that's for a couple reasons. I'm going to share those with you because I came away loving the book overall. And I think if you kind of know these things going in, you will have a better experience with it and you won't struggle like I did. Though maybe the struggle is part of the fun. I don't know, and makes it more meaningful. But here we go. So first off, one of the things that kind of didn't really rub me in a wrong way, maybe it did, it felt a little weird, where there were a lot of like really stereotypical, there were a lot of gay stereotypes in the book, especially towards the beginning, like the main character going to a musical and crying and saying like, this is like what all gays do, basically. And just things like that. And then there's this idea of this kind of like unhealthy age gap in a relationship. And so Les dates this guy, or I don't know what their relationship status is. They live together and have a serious relationship for a really long time. I want to say like 20 years or something. Maybe not that long. Something like that. Many years. And then they break up. And it's like he's like a much older guy that he's dating. And then when they break up, because that guy is too old, he starts dating a guy who's way too young for him. And it's this weird kind of stereotype of an unhealthy relationship with this big age gap, and then not being able to fully like share their lives together because they get to a point where one's too old and they just move on, move to the next one, and they move to younger and become the other one in that scenario. It's a whole thing. But I just want to clarify that I don't think that there's anything wrong with their relationship for being of different ages. Like, I don't think an age gap in a relationship is a big deal or anything like that. But what kind of rubbed me the wrong way about it is that it's presented as Arthur Les needing to adhere to some set of societal rules rather than to just do what he wants to do or what feels right for him. And throughout it, you see him kind of looking to societal norms of what he thinks he should be. And I think a lot of people do that, and it's very realistic, but it's frustrating to watch a character kind of beat their head against the wall, doing things that aren't right for them, and you can tell they kind of know it, but they do it anyways. All people deal with this, and particularly gay people deal with this as well, or people of any kind of minority group, is that when you're not part of the mainstream culture and you're part of this subculture, you're desperate to kind of fit in with something because you don't fit in with the larger world. So you're trying to Arthur's trying to be the best gay he can. And this is a theme throughout the book. And I find that kind of frustrating personally, because I want him to just like live his life and be himself and not worry about being bad at blending into mainstream straight culture, not worry about trying to fit in the gay culture, and just be himself. So that's all I'm trying to say here. But when that all kind of started to make sense for me was there's this part pretty early on where the narrator talks about Les being of this generation that is the first to learn, is the first generation of gay men to learn to get older, because the generation ahead of them was hit really hard by the AIDS epidemic and just didn't grow to old age. And so Les's generation is the one after that who is aging and have no kind of examples ahead of them for what they should do or what they should be as they age. And I found that really powerful and interesting. And it kind of explained those things that I had been feeling were a little weird. And it was because Les was trying to feel it out and figure out himself in what he should be doing without any examples. And then the other thing that similarly kind of struck me the wrong way, but then I got it over time, was that it feels like a lot of the novel is about focusing on these moments between things. And then when you get to these big moments when you'd expect it to be really powerful and like a focus, it's just kind of glossed over. And it felt kind of weird. Like, why did the author do this? It felt strange because like he's going on this world tour to these literary events. In almost every time it just kind of glosses over the event itself, and it'll just focus on a few like seemingly random moments of his trip in whatever country he's in at that time. And then the actual event will happen and it'll be like, he spoke, he did this. And it just kind of, that's it. And then what I realized is what it comes down to is this isn't really a travel book. And that's kind of what I came to it expecting. This kind of like a book that would take me on a tour of the world, and it would be about the travel, about the adventure, about these different places and cultures. And those things happen, they're part of the book, but they're not really the focus. So they're just kind of snapshots of places. And I think the snapshots aren't meant to be the focus of the book. They're meant to be a structure to the real story, which is Arthur and his relationships with the older guy, and then the younger one, which both spanned a long, like pretty much most of his life. And he's trying to kind of come to terms with that now, being single and looking back on them and where he's been in his life and trying to understand himself. And so this trip and the places he goes, the experiences he have, are really just kind of a structure to that story that often will like remind him of something that will send him into a flashback. And then the real focus will be on those moments in the past that he had in those relationships. So it's really a reflection of him and his relationships throughout his life. And this trip is just kind of the structure of how we see those experiences as they are told to us in flashbacks. And his story is really powerful and moving. There's a lot of growth in him specifically throughout the book. And he learns to kind of see himself in a new light and to kind of enjoy himself, I will say, maybe. And so what I would say about the book to make sure you enjoy it is don't go into it expecting this kind of travel book. Don't go into it expecting this to take place of travel in your own life because of the pandemic or whatever, and you want to get out and see the world through a book. Don't come to it expecting that, because you'll be let down to an extent like I was. But come to it expecting this book about relationships and how people change over time and how past relationships shape you and that kind of thing. And if that's what you come to it with, that mindset, I think you're going to enjoy it a lot more. You won't feel like you got the rug pulled out from under you, which is a little bit how I felt. And it did still come around for me. I did still enjoy it, but I felt like I could have enjoyed it more had I not been focusing on some of the wrong things. during the beginning of the book, and I would have been focused on the most important heart of the story throughout. So that is less. I did really enjoy this book. I would recommend it. And again, just take those things into consideration before, during, or after you read it. So yeah, if you've read less, let me know what you thought. Love to hear from you. And if you have read any of my TBRR books, let me know what you thought of those. I will be talking about them more as I RR them. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you're reading and any of the books I've discussed today. Thank you again so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.